63. The great city went quiet after they passed MacArthur Park and hit the 110. To their right, downtown was silent and deserted. There were lights on in Chinatown, but no visible activity. In the other direction, Dodger Stadium was huge and dark and empty. Then they came off the freeway and plunged into the surface streets to the east. Navigation had been difficult by day and was worse by night. But Reacher had made the trip 3 times before, twice as a passenger and once as a driver, and he figured he could spot the turns. And he did, without a problem. He slowed 3 blocks before New Age's building and let the others close up behind him. Then he led them through a wide 2-block circle, for caution's sake. Then a closer pass, on a 1-block radius. There was mist in the air. The glass cube looked dark and deserted. The ornamental trees in the lot were uplit with decorative spots and the light spilled a little and reflected off the building's mirror siding, but apart from that there was no specific illumination. The razor wire on the fence looked dull gray in the darkness and the main gate was closed. Reacher slowed next to it and dropped his window and stuck his arm out and made a circular gesture with his gloved finger in the air, like a baseball umpire signaling a home run. One more go-round. He led them through 3/4 of a round trip and then pointed at the curb where he wanted them to park. First Neagley, then O'Donnell behind her, then Dixon in his own silver Prelude. They slowed and stopped and he made throat-cutting gestures and they shut their motors down and climbed out. O'Donnell detoured all the way to the gate and came back and said, "It's a very big lock." Reacher was still at the wheel of the idling Chrysler. His window was still open. He said, "The bigger they are, the harder they fall. We doing this stealthy?" "Not very," Reacher said. "I'll meet you at the gate." They walked ahead, and he put the Chrysler in gear and followed them, slowly. The roads all around New Age's block were standard 22-foot blacktop ribbons, typical of new business park construction. No sidewalks. This was LA. 21,000 miles of surface streets, probably fewer than 21,000 yards of sidewalk. New Age's gate was set in a curved scallop maybe 20 feet deep, so that arriving vehicles could pull off the roadway and wait. Total distance between the gate and the far curb, 42 feet. Automatically the manic part of Reacher's mind told him that was the same as 14 yards or 504 inches or 0.795% of a mile, or a hair over 1,280 centimeters in European terms. He turned 90 degrees into the scallop and straightened head-on, and brought the Chrysler's front bumper to within an inch of the gate. Then he reversed straight back all the way until he felt the rear tires touch the far curb. He put his foot hard on the brake and slotted the transmission back into drive and dropped all 4 windows. Night air blew in, sharp and cold. The others looked at him and he pointed to where he wanted them, 2 on the left of the gate and 1 on the right. "Start the clock," he called. 2 minutes? He kept his foot on the brake and hit the gas until the transmission was wound up tight and the whole car was rocking and bucking and straining. Then he slipped his foot off the brake and stamped down on the accelerator and the car shot forward. It covered the 42 feet of available distance with the rear tires smoking and howling, and then it smashed head-on into the gate. The lock ruptured instantly and the gate smashed open and flung back and about a dozen airbags exploded inside the Chrysler, out of the steering wheel and the passenger fascia, and the header rails and the seats. Reacher was ready for them. He was driving one-handed and had his other arm up in front of his face. He stopped the driver's airbag with his elbow. No problem. The 4 open windows diffused the percussion shock and saved his eardrums. But the noise still deafened him. It was like sitting in a car and having someone fire a .44 at him. Ahead of him on the front wall of the building a blue strobe started flashing urgently. If there was an accompanying siren, he couldn't hear it. He kept his foot hard down. The car stumbled for a split second after the impact with the gate, and then it picked up the pace again and laid rubber all the way through the lot. He lined up the steering and risked a glance in the mirror and saw the others running full speed after him. Then he faced front and put both hands on the wheel and aimed for the reception area doors. He was doing close to 50 miles an hour when he reached them. The front wheels hit the shallow step and the whole car launched and smashed through the doors about a foot off the ground. Glass shattered and the door frames tore right out of the walls, and the car continued on inside more or less uninterrupted. It hit the slate floor with the brakes locked hard and skidded straight on and demolished the reception counter completely and knocked down the wall behind it and ended up buried in rubble to the base of the windshield, with the wreckage of the reception counter strewn all around under its midsection. Which is going to make Dixon's research difficult, Reacher thought. Then he shut his mind to that problem and unclipped his belt and forced his door open. Spilled out onto the lobby floor and crawled away. All around him tiny white alarm strobes were flashing. His hearing was coming back. A loud siren was sounding. He got to his feet and saw the others hurdling the wreckage in the doorway and running inside from the lot. Dixon was heading straight for the back of the lobby, and O'Donnell and Neagley were heading for the mouth of the corridor where the Dragon Lady had come out twice before. Their flashlights were already on and bright cones of light were jerking and bouncing in front of them through clouds of swirling white dust. He pulled his own flashlight out and switched it on and followed them. 21 seconds gone, he thought. There were 2 elevators halfway down the corridor. Their indicator panels showed it to be a 3-story building. He didn't press the call button. He figured the alarm would have already shut down the elevators. Instead he flung open an adjacent door and hit the stairs. Ran all the way up to the 3rd floor, 2 steps at a time. The sound of the siren was unbearable in the stairwell. He burst out into the 3rd floor corridor. He didn't need his flashlight. The alarm strobes were lighting the place up like the disco from hell. The corridor was lined on both sides with maple doors 20 feet apart. Offices. The doors had nameplates on them. Long black plastic rectangles, engraved with letters cut through to a white base layer. Directly in front of him Neagley was busy kicking down a door labeled Margaret Berenson. The stop-motion effect of the alarm strobes made her movement weird and jerky. The door wouldn't give. She pulled out her Glock and fired 3 aimed shots into the lock. 3 loud explosions. The spent brass kicked out of the pistol's ejection port and rolled away on the carpet, frozen by the strobes into a long golden chain. Neagley kicked the door again and it sagged open. She went inside. Reacher moved on. 52 seconds gone, he thought. He passed a door labeled Alan LeMason. 20 carpeted feet farther on he saw another door, Anthony Swan. He braced himself against the opposite wall and wound up and delivered a mighty kick with his heel, just above the lock. The maple splintered, and the door sagged, but the catch held. He finished the job with a sharp blow from the flat of his gloved hand and tumbled inside. 63 seconds gone, he thought. He stood stock still and played his flashlight beam all around his dead friend's office. It was untouched. It was like Swan had just stepped out to the bathroom or gone out for lunch. There was a coat hanging on a hat stand. It was a khaki windbreaker, old, worn, plaid-lined like a golf jacket, short and wide. There were file cabinets. Phones. A leather chair, crushed in places by the weight of a heavy barrel-shaped man. There was a computer on the desk. And a new blank notepad. and pens, and pencils. A stapler. A clock. A small pile of papers. And a paperweight, holding the papers down. A lump of Soviet concrete, irregular in shape, the size of a fist, grey and polished to a greasy shine by handling, one flat face with faint traces of blue and red sprayed graffiti still on it. Reacher stepped to the desk and put the lump of concrete in his pocket. Took the pile of papers from under it and rolled them tight and put them in his other pocket. Suddenly became aware of a softness under his feet. He played the flashlight beam downward. Saw rich red colors reflected back. Ornate patterns. Thick pile. An oriental rug. Brand new. He recalled the cord on Orozco's wrists and ankles and Curtis Morney's words, "It's a Sisal product from the Indian subcontinent. It would have to come in on whatever gets exported from there." 89 seconds gone, he thought. 31 to go. He stepped to the window. Saw Carla Dixon far below in the darkness, already on her way out of the lot. Her pants and her jacket were scuffed and coated with white dust. She looked like a ghost. From crawling around in the wallboard dust, he guessed. She was carrying papers and some kind of a white 3-ring binder. She was lit up in short blue pulses by the strobe on the front of the building. 26 seconds to go. He saw O'Donnell run out below like he was escaping from a burning house, taking giant strides, carrying stuff clutched to his chest. And then Neagley a second later, running hard, long dark hair streaming out behind her, arms pumping, with a thick wad of green file folders gripped in each hand. 19 seconds to go. He crossed the office and touched the jacket on the hat stand, gently, on the shoulder, like Swan was still in it. Then he stepped back behind the desk and sat down in the chair. It creaked once as he settled. He heard the sound quite clearly over the siren. 12 seconds to go. He looked out at the manic flashing in the corridor and knew he could just wait. Sooner or later, maybe in less than a minute, the men who had killed his friends would show up. As long as there were fewer than 34 of them, he could sit right where he was and take them all down, one by one. 5 seconds to go. Except that he couldn't, of course. Nobody was that dumb. After the first 3 or 4 Kias had piled up in the doorway, the rest of them would regroup in the corridor and start thinking about tear gas and reinforcements and body armor. Maybe they would even think about calling the cops or the FBI. And Reacher knew there was no way to be sure of putting the right guys down before he lost a 3 or 4 day siege against a whole bunch of trained SWAT teams. 1 second to go. He exploded out of the chair and out through the broken door and jinked left into the corridor and right into the stairwell. Neagley had wedged the door open for him. He hit the first floor about 10 seconds over budget. He dodged around the inert Chrysler in the lobby and was out in the lot 15 seconds late. Through the wrecked gate and out in the street 40 seconds late. Then he ran toward the pale gleam of the Silver Prelude. It was 100 yards away, distant and innocent, and alone. The other 2 Hondas were already gone. He covered the 100 yards in 20 seconds and hurled himself inside. He slammed his door after him, and struggled upright in his seat. He was breathing hard, mouth wide open. He turned his head and saw a set of headlights in the far distance, moving very fast, coming toward him, swinging around corners, then diving low from braking.